I'm not a crook.
They're like, I'm so scared. It's the same thing. It's like an adrenaline rush. Of
Totally.
Like,
It's empowering.
it is.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think there's not enough people being empowered with their own will to do things.
Totally.
That's for sure. So yeah, fear. It's a big one.
It's huge.
It's a big reason I started this podcast.
Fear?
I know it sounds, fear, because I'm so antisocial.
So funny.
I'm incredibly antisocial.
Yeah.
And it's actually my therapist. It's like, you should probably talk to more people.
Really?
I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, you don't really talk to people. Like you just kind of, I don't really socialize.
I find
She was
you
like,
so engaging though.
She was like, you talk, you can talk. Why don't you like interview your friends? I was like, okay. I don't know. There's this thing called exposure therapy. It's a legit type of therapy.
What is that?
For people with panic disorder. It's so people with panic attacks, and this also is with OCD, which sucks. I have both.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But
Oh God, what a terrible combination those are. OCD with
it's not, and when people think OCD, it's not always compulsive.
Of course.
I don't have a compulsive type of OCD.
Yeah.
But anywho, there's an actual therapy called exposure therapy where it's therapy, but it's not talk therapy. You write down the things that give you anxiety and fear, and you do them very slowly with a therapist. You introduce yourself to the things that you fear.
Right.
And that's really the only treatment for panic disorder. There's no other treatment. There's medication, but that's treating symptoms. There's that's how you cure literal bodily fear, is exposing yourself to the things you're scared of, whether that's germs or flying, or for me, it was driving. I couldn't drive for a long time. And I had to like slowly, I would just go in the car and turn the engine on and sit in it and breathe. And then I'd step out. And I'd do that for a few days. It sounds really weird.
It's not weird because I used to have this. And this was stress from a breakup where I would drive on a highway. There was about 6 months of my life where this happened, and I would have a physical panic attack to where like I was like, I'm dying.
Yeah.
And so it was driving. Driving is a common.
It is. Yeah. I guess it is
trigger.
really common. Driving, germs, flying.
That was one too.
Exercising, believe it or not, is a really big one. Yeah.
Exercising.
There's a few big ones. Driving is one of the big ones. And for me, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I started flipping out. I thought like if something bad happened, I wouldn't be able to get out of the car, or
Right.
I kept thinking I'm driving like I'm a flying bullet.
Yeah.
Like anyone could kill me and I could kill anyone at any moment. Anyways, I'm fine now. I drive all over the place.
Good.
But the only way I did that.
And congratulations.
The only way that happened was literally doing exposure therapy with a fucking professional. But that's how you do. That's how you do things. You just have to do it. That's the only. It sucks, but that's the only way to really get past a fear.
Yeah.
Is doing it, like you said. Whether that's just in your life, whether it's your career, or with your relationship with somebody, or if it's a physical, just day-to-day thing like driving, or I don't know, flying, any of those kind of things. But yeah, exposure therapy, that's just life.
Yeah.
Life's one giant exposure.
It is.
And it's how far you take it. I think a lot of people, you're saying, like someone that goes skydiving, I feel like if you can skydive and survive and pick yourself up off the ground when you land, the kind of empowerment you must have is like, I can just do anything.
Absolutely.
Like, the fear that just melts fear away.
Yeah.
And it's probably the same creatively, you going solo and doing all these things for yourself. I can't speak for you, but I can imagine you being like, wow, I should have done this sooner. What was holding me back from all this? If I can do this, I can do all these other things now.
Right.
Like it like opens all these different doors basically. But
I think it was a timing. I don't think I could have done this 2 years ago. And I think, it was just the fear was holding me back. And 2 years ago, it's funny that you brought that up. I was having these crazy panic attacks. And I started going to a therapist, and we did the same thing. It was just like, we'll just,
Yeah.
go back.
Slowly
Yeah.
inch into the, yeah.
And it was just really stress. And when I think about it, I'm glad it happened too, because there was just something so wrong in my life that was like a warning to me. Like, examine what's going on. Like, why are you so unhappy? Why are you so depressed? And like, I was just in the worst depression, and that's why the panic attacks started. And then, I had like insomnia once for a week where I actually did not sleep for like 7 nights in a row.
That'll mess you up.
And I just remember waking up, not even waking up. It was, the sun was coming up, and I was just like crying, and I was like, what is wrong with me? I felt just broken. And then it just made me look at everything, my life, what I wanted, what I wasn't doing. And I wasn't challenging myself anymore, and I got super depressed. And then that's when everything turned around, because that was my emotional rock bottom. I was done. And then, the panic. It's what's so hard about a panic attack is that you cannot believe that it's your brain doing this to yourself.
Yeah, it's the last thing you want to think is, you think I'm having a heart attack,
right?
Or I'm having an asthma. Maybe I have asthma I never knew, or I got. The last thing you want to think is it's anxiety,
and that you're
the
doing
fact
it.
that it's so powerful.
Yeah,
it's really. I can't even describe a panic attack unless someone's had one. It's its own. It's a psychedelic experience. It's the only way I can explain it to somebody.
Yeah.
It's an out-of-body experience for sure. And it's really hard to imagine that it's just yourself. It's you attacking yourself.
Because it is.
Yeah.
And it got so bad to like, I just started having this like, I just started saying to myself, like, this was what actually comforted me. And this is like my sense of humor. When I would get into this like panic, I'd just say, well, okay, what's the worst that could happen? You could die. And that became like my joke that actually like kind of made me feel better.
Yeah,
like, what are you so afraid of? You're afraid of dying. Okay, so that's the worst thing. Okay. What's the worst that you could happen is you could die. That's so dark, but that's actually what kind of helped me.
It's a coping mechanism.
Yeah,
for sure.
and then that made me kind of laugh, and then that was like what started the healing process, I guess. But it was more just like the examination of why I was so depressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depression, I feel like, is a huge umbrella term. Mm-hmm. How do I describe it? I feel like depression as a term is a blanket statement.
Yeah.
In the sense that there's different people react differently to being depressed.
Mm-hmm. Or even being called depressed.
Yeah, either or even just feeling it, even if it's just momentary depression. So it's tricky that the terminology stuff with all that's really tricky, because a lot of people will just feel really anxious, and that's just, in turn, they're really depressed.
Right.
And they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
A lot of people will be depressed and it affects their mood negatively. Like, they're sad. They have no energy. They cry. They're overwhelmed with sadness. Some people obsess and like ruminate on things because it alleviates having to think about how empty they feel.
Of course.
So it's interesting. People kind of react differently to it. And I think a lot of it is more genetic than people make it out to be.
I know it is, because I've seen patterns in my parents. But
for sure. It's really genetic.
Yeah.
It's like, people don't, I never knew that until I was hit with all this and had to kind of deal with this on my own and kind of figure out how to become functioning again.
Right.
But it's very genetic, which is unfortunate.
But if you can look at it that clinically, I actually think it helps you, because then you're not just sitting around saying like, oh, my parents suck. You know what I mean? It makes it just easier to say it's genetic. What can I do to change right now and not fall into those patterns?
For sure.
Because there's so, like, looking back,